Hello, Canada, and welcome to another episode of the Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever, and we've got a really full episode tonight. We're going to be covering a lot of different subject matters. First, I want to give you guys a couple of quick updates on some of the stories we've covered in the past, particularly the trucker convoy. Then we're going to do a really big deep dive into the World Economic Forum, WEF, and Canada and Canadian politicians. If you guys haven't heard about WEF, you're going to want to buckle up for this one. Again, we're only going to really be able to chip away at the very top tip of the iceberg on this. Let me know if you guys would like to see a full deep dive episode on everything World Economic Forum. We can both put on our, tinfoil hats and really jump deep into the world they're planning for us in 2030. But before we even get into that, I just want to say I really appreciate everyone that's been, liking these videos, subscribing, sharing it on social media, because for a new series, we're on episode 13 right now, episode lucky 13. And the reason I feel it's kind of lucky is the fact we haven't been canceled yet, despite the fact that, I use bad words like COVID or anti-government rhetoric. So again, really appreciate those of you that have been supporting the podcast and this show. And jump in the comment section. As always, I want to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and links to every single thing that we're going to be talking about tonight in the video description down below, because I really do believe it's important you guys do your own research, you do your own due diligence. Don't let this show be the end of your information gathering journey. Let this really just be the springboard where you guys jump in and start really figuring things out for yourself, because it's very obvious the elites, we're going to get to the elites later on in the show. The elites have no interest in having you guys critically think for yourselves. And it's very obvious based upon, last night's episode, the hubris that the Liberal Party has towards us. And speaking about Liberal Party hubris, just a quick reminder, we did a special edition last night where we just jumped deep into the trucker freedom convoy that's going on here in Canada, and really just try to dispel all the misinformation, all the half-truths and lies that the mainstream media, when they do choose to cover it, seems to only focus on. So again, as I mentioned, actually, today the trucker convoy was taken off from Kenora, which is, just north of where the Citadel is. So actually, a few of the Citadel residents went there to go support it and, counted about 1,000 vehicles, they figure, minimum going by, which is just interesting because continuously we're hearing about hundreds of people. But again, jump into that entire episode. It's an hour long. I'm really proud of what I was able to put together there. But again, give me your thoughts, your opinions. Also, let me know firsthand what you're seeing in that in the comment section on that other video. But let's move on and jump into some of the quick updates before we get into the blue pill. So, just want to cover this real quick from the post-millennial. Old Trudeau tweet tells Canadians to thank a trucker. Now, I want to say, and this is tongue-in-cheek what I'm about to say here, but I want to say I'm assuming that this was just a, kind of a slip post here, and it looks like it was posted at 8 p.m. on March 31st, 2020. I'm assuming that our prime minister meant to post it on April 1st, and this was really just an April Fool's joke, because we know now that he thinks that truckers, particularly those that are unvaxxed, they're essentially just part of, the filthy, unwashed masses that need to be locked in their homes, that need to have pretty much all their rights and freedoms restricted from them. And, most of them are just like white nationalists anyways. And that's literally according to your prime minister. But let's move on. Just want to cover real quick a couple updates. And this one's from the Toronto Sun. So Freedom Truckers may form world's longest convoy. And I actually found this really interesting. I got a feeling they'll find a way to somehow discount this, because the convoy isn't all just transportation trucks. There are a lot of just, normal pickup trucks, vans, RVs, and things of that nature. But it is kind of interesting. So according to Guinness World Records, the longest truck convoy ever was recorded 7.5 kilometers long in Egypt in 2020. Now, if you guys have been following along with what's going on with the trucker convoy, it appears that it's anywhere between 70 to 100, even longer than that potentially, is what I'm hearing from some people. And it sounded like in Kenora, it took about an hour and a half for them to all roll past, but already a large portion had gone on to Dryden. So again, we're just coming into Ontario, which is the most heavily populated province in Canada. So we'd expect to see a lot more people joining the convoy. I really do hope that they set a world record, not because I think that that's the end all be all of the success of this protest, but that'll maybe help give it some legitimacy that like, oh, hey, more than 10 people showed up. And if you guys don't get the 10-person reference, make sure you jump back and watch yesterday's episode, but it is really interesting. And so, as they mentioned here in the article, the Freedom Convoy heading from British Columbia to Ottawa is said to be considerably longer. It's 70 kilometers long, said Benjamin Ditcher, a spokesperson for the Freedom Convoy 2022. I've seen footage from an airplane. It's impressive. 100%. It looked very impressive from all the clips I saw today of them leaving Kenora. And then just going a little bit further on this, I want to cover now. This isn't misinformation, but the way I've seen a lot of people framing it on social media make it sound like, the police, that the federal government, that Ottawa's bracing for like a January 6th type event, because of this Freedom Convoy. I think that that's really doing a disservice to the individuals that are participating on this. As we mentioned yesterday, I've been listening on the Zello app, and it's all just good vibes. It honestly is just wholesome Canadians sharing their support. They want their freedoms back. They want to be able to go grocery shopping without having to show QR passcodes. They want to be able to go back to restaurants. Really just normal people shit. But Ottawa braces, and this is from Global News, Ottawa braces for significant trucker convoy disruptions as police warn of risks. Now, it's important first for us all to understand that whenever there's a protest, let alone a large-scale protest, the police are going to be involved, right? They're going to try and make sure that they mitigate any risks, both for those attending as well as if there's counter-protesters, and just making sure things don't get out of hand. There's nothing really unusual about that. And yet the way it's being framed by a lot of people on social media make it sound like, oh, it's all white supremacists, and that's why the police have to get involved and they got to be prepared because, they're going to try and do a January 6th. I just don't see it happening. And everyone that's associated officially with the convoy, they're constantly talking about being peaceful. They're constantly talking about being respectful. We had a quote from last night that essentially was, let's be so respectful that, and show so much kindness that they can't help but support us, right? That sort of approach is what's being taken here. And it's important to note, too, so far they've broken no rules, no laws. But from the article here, Ottawa police say they have been in touch with leaders of a trucker convoy over the weekend, protest plans in the capital, and are getting ready for several scenarios, including violence. Again, this is pretty standard procedure. If you guys are a police officer, let me know if you think that I'm misrepresenting it, but I think this is pretty standard procedure for any large-scale protest. Chief Peter Slowly told the Police Services Board Wednesday that he was working with the RCMP and intelligence bodies to prepare for the protest against the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for cross-border truckers, as well as the counter-protests expected against the demonstrators. Slowly said convoy organizers have been cooperative in telling police about their plans for the protest, which he predicts could last several days, but the situation is evolving rapidly. Again, seems pretty standard, although I want to point out something here that really doesn't pass the sniff test, in my opinion. So Ottawa police estimate there could be up to 2,000 demonstrators, but this number is shifting quickly and warn residents against traveling downtown during the event. Now, again, it really depends on where you're getting your facts from. I think, was it Theon Fury? He was saying that it could be upwards of 1.4 million people attending. I think that that's a pretty aggressive statement. We're seeing, 500,000 often thrown around. Some people are saying 50,000. Again, just based upon our personal experience, seeing what happened in Kenora, if there's 1,000 or more vehicles, well, you'd expect at least 1,000 people here already. And that's before they're getting into Ontario, which again is the most populous province, as well as all the truckers potentially coming from out east in Quebec as well. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that, but I feel like that's really downplaying the number of people expected to attend. But hey, time will tell. And again, it is important we understand this is Canada in the dead of winter. Ottawa is not a particularly warm city. So again, I think thousands of people or tens of thousands, or if somehow we break hundreds of thousands, that really is a statement that I think will be difficult for politicians, for the administration to ignore. So those of you that are on the fence, I encourage you to find a way to support it, however you feel appropriate. But I think, as we mentioned last night, it's important to understand this is more than just about trucker vaccine mandates. This is really just a proxy for all the crazy shit that's going on in Canada and all the frustrations that a lot of us Canadians have. So again, just wanted to point that out. And then one last, I didn't know where to fit this story in, so this is one more quick update, then we'll get into the main show. But This is from National News Watch. And so Public Safety Minister calls for removal of Hillier hate tweet about algebra. So this is kind of a complicated subject matter, but I hate the hierarchy of victimhood, the race to victimhood that we see these days. And so it's all about having a trump card where you can pretend you're a victim. And so as the article states, and you guys can go look at the tweets as well, Ottawa Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino is calling on Twitter to remove a tweet from an Ontario politician who labeled Federal Transport Minister Omar Al-Ghabra a terrorist. Mendicino said Tuesday the tweet from independent MPP Randy Hillier is Islamophobic and amounts to hate speech that should have no place on Twitter. Hillier referred to him, who is a Muslim, as a terrorist who has condemned Canadians to starvation in the name of public safety. In a separate statement, Hillier called on the RCMP to open a criminal investigation into Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, whom he accused of engaging in an act of domestic terrorism by depriving Canadians of food and other basic necessities in the middle of winter. So what really frustrates me about this is this seems clearly like just a race to victimhood. You can call the Prime Minister a domestic terrorist, and that's okay because he's white, presumably a straight white male. But if you call someone that's Muslim a terrorist, then it's immediately Islamophobic. It has nothing to do with his religion, right? And it has everything to do with his role in the government and what the government's doing to the average citizen. Hillier's been very outspoken throughout this entire pandemic. To be honest, he seems like one of the only straight shooters actually in politics right now. And I personally have found him to be a breath of fresh air and really enjoyed following him along on Twitter. So I encourage you guys, follow along with him and make your own decision. You know, figure it out for yourself. Do you really think that that was an anti-Muslim tweet? Or do you think he was simply expressing his opinion and wasn't really taking the individual's religion into consideration when using that terminology? I just think it's fucking bullshit. But that's my hot take on it. Again, as always, I'd love to get your thoughts, your opinions in that comment section or the live chat if you're watching this live. Now, let's jump into the blue pill story of the day. And first, we're going to be hitting off on Bank of Canada. So if you guys follow me on social media, you know that I haven't really been buying the narrative we've been seeing from mainstream media, the mainstream analysts from the Canadian big five banks. Everyone's been talking about how, you know, Bank of Canada is going to be jacking up rates. Bank of Nova Scotia predicted just a week ago that not only were they going to raise rates this week by 0.25, but they expected 1.75 or 175 basis points in interest rate raises this year alone. So understand the fact that the Bank of Canada ended up actually holding the key interest rate, but is warning of looming hikes. That means that literally for Bank of Nova Scotia to be on target with their prediction at this point in time, they're going to have to raise it every other time because the Bank of Canada only meets 8 times a year. And we just had one of those just passed literally today. In my opinion, if you want to know my hot take, I literally think that at most they're probably going to do 2 rate hikes this year. So that's a 0.5 or 50 basis points total. And the only reason I think they're honestly doing that is to try and save face. If you guys have been following me on social media for like the last 3 or 4 years, I've been constantly berating central bankers saying they all pretend to be hawks when they're truly dovish in nature, simply because, you know, Canadians, corporations, everyone in North America is addicted to cheap debt. And I just don't see how they can actually go cold turkey. I don't see how we could actually have the economy absorb a 1.75% interest rate hike in a single year. It seems like complete bullshit to me. I'm sure they'll find some sort of excuse or reason. You know, there'll be a new variant. They'll say that we didn't hit projections. Again, the only reason I think the big bankers and analysts are towing this narrative, I can't believe that they're actually that stupid to think we'd see these aggressive rate hikes on the schedules they've been predicting. I assume it's just because they're fetching water for the central bankers. You know, they kind of have a incestuous relationship there. But so just in case you somehow missed it, Ottawa, the Bank of Canada, kept its key interest rate on hold Wednesday, but warned higher interest rates are coming to help it reel in inflation from its highest pace in 3 decades. So yeah, inflation's literally the highest it's been in 3 decades. And that's after we've, you know, done some monkey business with how we calculate CPI. And again, we've covered that in previous videos with the hedonic adaptations, right? Or the hedonic adjustments, sorry. And yeah, it's just, it's fascinating to me that they talk out of both sides of their mouth, and they just assume, I think, that the average Canadian either doesn't care or isn't smart enough to actually understand what's going on. And this is why real estate's so unaffordable in Canada is terrible monetary policy. It's government overreach and government overspending. So here's a quote. The fact that Bank of Canada exercised a bit of patience today, to me, suggests that they are going to move somewhat more gradually than the market is anticipating, said RBC senior economist Josh Nye, who expects 4 rate increases this year. And so, again, I expect that we'll continue to see the analysts and bankers really dialing back their projections as we go on throughout this year, because I think we're going to realize the emperor has no clothes and has no balls and no ability to actually raise interest rates. But again, that's my prediction. Let me know what your thoughts are on all this in that comment section. Just wanted to highlight again from Toronto Sun, again, talking about how the Bank of Canada says food prices increases to outpace inflation. So not only do we have the highest inflation in 30 years, they're saying that we're actually going to see food inflation higher than the CPI inflation, or the average inflation. So from the article, Ottawa, the cost of food in Canada is likely to continue growing at inflation, busting rates in 2022, thanks to supply disruptions and higher commodity and energy prices, the Bank of Canada said on Wednesday. Now, again, remember how the politicians and the mainstream media have been telling us that there's really no serious supply disruptions, that's not impacting prices, and you don't need to panic as Canadians when it comes to groceries. Well, again, this seems like the opposite of that from the Bank of Canada. Prices for food bought in stores are up nearly 6% year over year, a 10-year high. Honestly, that even feels a little low. I'm paying a lot more than 6% per year. Let me know what you guys are experiencing. But price for bacon and beef rose by 19% and 12% respectively, while margarine posted an 18% gain. I mean, you probably just shouldn't be eating margarine, so you can probably cut that and not worry about that 18% gain. But again, we're seeing significant rises in the cost of food, particularly like real food, right? When you're looking at the cost of produce, when you're looking at the cost of meat. I'm sure I don't really buy a lot of grains, but I'm sure that they're going up as well. It's more like the fake food, the plastic that you're essentially eating that isn't really seeing the same sort of price pressure at this point in time. And so moving on with the blue pill, this is from True North. Major grocery store chain confirms trucker vaccine mandate is increasing costs. So again, we've had stories earlier on in the week that were saying that essentially the vaccine mandates and the trucker protest and Convoy wasn't really going to impact us, wasn't going to impact the supply chain, wasn't going to impact the cost of food. But now we've got the CEO of Metro saying this. The CEO of a major grocery chain has admitted that the COVID-19 vaccine requirements for cross-border truckers is raising the cost of shipping fresh foods to Canadian stores. Yeah, it's really just basic economics at this point in time. We shouldn't be surprised, but despite there being empty shelves, LaFletch said there has been no real hoarding. So again, this is one of those things where they're trying to frame this as a positive, but understand that we've got empty shelves, and they're telling us that, you know, Canadians aren't panicking yet, that they're not starting to hoard. So what happens if Canadians do start to panic? What if they do start to hoard? Well, that feels like it'd probably compound the situation. Wouldn't it almost be better if we were just starting to get to empty shelves, but we'd already all done our hoarding? Because we presumably wouldn't need to go and hoard then at that point in time. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a little bit too deep on the black pill today, guys. Let me know if you think I'm just crying over sour grapes here, but that's my hot take. And then so this doesn't fit in perfectly to the blue pill, but I did want to highlight this. So this is from the Fraser Institute. So higher inflation and higher unemployment make Canada sixth most miserable country among 35 advanced economies. So while a lot of politicians want to pretend that inflation's not a big deal, it seems like Pierre Poilievre is the only one in Canada that actually does care about inflation. And fingers crossed someday he's going to get orange pilled and become a Bitcoin maximalist. He just doesn't know it yet, I feel like, at this point in time. But it seems like the Bitcoiners already got to Jordan Peterson. So Pierre Poilievre feels like it's just a matter of time at this point in time. But again, it's important to understand there are serious consequences, not just to the prices you pay at the grocery store, but to your overall quality of life when we're talking about rapid inflation, particularly when wages aren't keeping up. So again, there's a link to this article in the video description down below. I'll leave it to you guys to jump in and do a deep dive on it, but just wanted to highlight that. So let's move on to the red pill story of the day. And we're going to be talking about COVID. We're going to be talking about mandates. We're going to be talking about kids as well. And so the first story here is from Canada News Media. And proof of vaccination for kids may move needle on lagging rates. And this is from London Free Press. London, originally my hometown. I used to kind of like in London. So it's taken months, but Middlesex London officially passed the magical threshold of 90% coverage for 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine. And this is from January 26th. So, it's literally an article coming out today. So I guess the first question I've got, now that we've passed that magical threshold of 90%, what happens? All right, nothing happens. We're literally in the exact same spot we were a year ago. We're almost in the same spot we were like 22 months ago. But we passed that magical threshold of 90%. So does that mean we're all going to just get to go back to normal? Well, the article continues, and the latest vaccine coverage statistical reports, the health unit posted that 90.2% of eligible people aged 12 and older were fully vaccinated. Bravo. And as the article continues on, they essentially start talking about how they believe that we need to start enforcing mandates and particularly vaccination passports on children in order to get the uptake, because I thought I highlighted here, but there are 2 areas where Middlesex London continues to slog. Only 47.2% of people older than 12 have boosters. Again, what happens if we get to 90% boosters? Spoiler alert, nothing's going to happen. But they really want to go after your children at this point in time. And it blows my mind that people are still willing to swallow this narrative when we pass that magical 90%. And yet we see other countries in Europe, we see other states in the United States that aren't even near 90%, 2 doses of the vaccines. And they're more open, they're more free, and they seem to be able to have giant sports events. They're able to go back to normal. And yet we want to pat ourselves on the back for 90%, and yet nothing changes in our day-to-day lives. And so continuing down this red pill, it does seem like we're starting to fracture in regards to what people actually believe is going on in regards to COVID. So this is from canoe.com, but it's courtesy of the Canadian Press. So survey, widening gap between views of double vax and boosted people. You know why that gap is widening? Because the double vax are realizing that very soon they're going to be considered not vaccinated if they don't get the booster. And I think anyone with more than 2 brain cells to rub together is starting to ask themselves, well, could there be a 4th booster or like a 4th shot like we're seeing in Israel already? Oh, yeah, I guess so. Well, when does this stop? And we're already starting to hear people talking about how this is essentially going to be endemic like the flu. Well, you've got to get a flu, or they want you to get a flu vaccine every year or every flu season. So is that going to be the case for COVID-19? And it's the lack of transparency, openness, and honesty that I think is really causing people to question the general narrative of what's going on in our society, what the motivations of our politicians are. And yeah, I don't blame a single Canadian for starting to get frustrated. From the article, a web panel survey carried out by Ledger for Association for Canadian Studies shows 67% of people with a booster dose who responded are afraid of contracting COVID-19, compared to just 52% of those with 2 doses. So interesting, the people that have got more shots are more scared of COVID. For instance, 82% of boosted respondents said they supported vaccine mandates at shopping malls and retail outlets, compared to only 57.8% of the people with 2 doses. And I suspect the reason for that is, other than the fact that presumably the people that have got boosters are probably more at risk, or you would assume they're more at risk. But the other factor is, I think the people that haven't chosen to get boosted yet are starting to wonder, am I going to be on a treadmill that I can never get off? Is this just a rat race of boosters where I'm going to constantly have to get additional shots in order to be considered allowed to participate in all aspects of society? Generally, unvaccinated people responded at the other far end of the spectrum, with 65% responding that COVID-19 restrictions should be lifted and 94% expressing opposition to vaccine mandates in shopping centers. The results were gathered from 1,547 Canadians over the age of 18 between January 7th and 9th and cannot be assigned a margin of error because the web survey did not randomly sample the population. So, this isn't really a bulletproof survey here, but I guess it at least lines up with my biases. And I'd love to hear, what are you guys experiencing? What are you hearing from your friends and family? Are you noticing a gap widening between those that are like, boost me harder, daddy, I want to get a shot every single day, and those that are like, hey, I thought getting 2 shots was me doing my part, and you're going to let me go back to normal? Again, love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and what you guys are experiencing. And so another story here from canoe.com. Hospital staff speak out over vaccine mandate firings. So a Toronto hospital lab technician who has had COVID-19 twice is speaking out over her frustrations with her employer's plan to terminate her in early February for not receiving 2 doses of vaccine. She continues on with a direct quote here. So I don't get where they're coming from with this and why it is that you have to be forced to take the vaccine when you've already gotten the virus and already have your own immunity, says Denise Grant Balchuran, who has worked as a medical laboratory technologist for the past 15 years at Humber River Hospital. A new study by the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention found that natural immunity among unvaccinated people with a past infection was considered superior to vaccine-induced immunity in persons who had not yet had the virus. The report, however, also found that those who were vaccinated and had previously had the virus were in the best position. A quote from Grant here. So I'm not opposed to vaccines at all. I'm in science, and that's what I've done all my life. What I'm opposed to is this tyranny to force people to take a vaccine. The experienced technician says that she wasn't given a chance to explain her situation to anyone and that her union is not offering any support. Instead, her employer has left her voicemails and says they will be sending her a letter in the mail. Grant says it doesn't make sense to let people go now, given that hospitals are short-staffed and there are already other protocols in place. We're not jeopardizing people's health, she adds. 100% agree. It's asinine at this point in time. It's embarrassing. And yet, I think what we need to understand is the sunk cost fallacy that apparently our politicians, our administrators, our science advisory table here in Ontario, I think, honestly, they're just too scared to change the narrative. They're too scared to change course because they think that's going to make them look weak. Or if all of a sudden there's a reversal and, a crazy new variant comes out that actually becomes scary and deadly, that, again, it'll paint them in a negative light. It just feels like this is all political posturing at this point in time. And there's really no rationality underneath what's going on. Why was it safe for these people to work in our hospitals a year ago, 22 months ago, but now all of a sudden we need this line in the sand? Exact same thing goes for the truckers as well. So I completely understand why she would be so frustrated over what's going on in her situation. And then one last point here on the blue pill story. This is from the province. So Omicron, no big deal. Majority of Canadians believe COVID-19 no worse than the flu, poll says. About 85% of Canadians believe they'll get either a mild or manageable case of COVID-19. And now what is interesting, this study actually does have a margin of error, so it appears that it's a little bit more trustworthy than the previous one we were discussing. But it's so strange when we've got polls coming out a week or two ago where, it was saying the average Canadian is down for these mandates. They think that, the unvaccinated should be punished even more. And yet at the same time, it seems like the majority of people don't think Omicron's a big deal or that they're going to significantly be at risk. I don't understand. Maybe the narrative's evolving very fast. Maybe we're capable of holding, two opposing views on the same subject matter at the same time. Maybe it depends exactly on how these questions are being framed to the respondents. But I do find this all just interesting, to say the least. So the Angus Reid Institute asked more than 5,000 Canadians who haven't been infected with COVID about how concerned they are about contracting the coronavirus. About 85% said they believe they'll get either a mild or manageable case, a significant increase from 57% who said the same in December 2020 before vaccinations and variants of concern came into play. Only 12% fear hospitalization, while 3% worry that getting infected could kill them. Yep. According to the report, residents of Alberta, 10%, and Saskatchewan, 8%, are more likely to adopt a laissez-faire attitude towards getting a COVID infection. In comparison, New Brunswick has the highest number in the country worried about hospitalization at 18%, followed by BC at 15%. Again, it doesn't seem like it's the vast majority of Canadians are panicking over COVID. So I guess my biggest question is, WTF is going on? The findings are based on the Angus Reid Institute's online survey conducted from January 7th to 12th among a representation randomized sample of 5,000 Canadian adults who are members of the Angus Reid Forum. For comparison purposes, a probability sample of this size would carry a margin of error of plus or minus 2 percentage points 19 times out of 20. So again, if this is as reliable as they're saying, I guess I look forward to more and more Canadians stopping caring about Omicron and COVID in general, and fingers crossed that is the case. But enough of the red pill. Let's jump into the black pill story of the day. And this one's a doozy. In fact, I'd love to get your thoughts. Let me know if you'd like me to do a deep dive on this, because we're really just going to be able to scratch the surface of the World Economic Forum. But let's get into it. So quick little recap in case you somehow don't know what the World Economic Forum is. It's essentially, a forum of the elites that believe that they were essentially destined to govern over us. They're plutocrats, right? Like they're technocrats. They really think that they know what's best for us, and that, us filthy plebs, we shouldn't really be taking care of ourselves. And so probably the main reason you would have heard of the World Economic Forum up until this point in time was their predictions for what 2030 could look like. And so I just wanted to highlight, and this is from the worldeconomicforum.org, a couple of the predictions they have for 2030. So the first one here is all products will have become services. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes, writes Danish MP Ida Auken. Shopping is a distant memory in the city of 2030 whose inhabitants have cracked clean energy and borrowed what they need on demand. It sounds utopian until she mentions that her every move is tracked, and outside the city live swaths of discontents, the ultimate depiction of a society split in two. One prediction, I'm going to be in that swath of discontents. And if you guys are interested in joining me as one of the swaths of discontents, there's a link to the Problems and Profits Citadel Discord in the video description down below. They're also predicting there's a global price on carbon. So that's really no surprise. They've been salivating at the idea of carbon taxes for a long time. Number 5 here is we are eating much less meat. Rather, like our grandparents, we will treat meat as a treat rather than a staple, writes Tim Brenton, professor of population ecology at the University of Leeds, UK. It won't be big agriculture or little artisan producers that win, but rather a combination of the two, with convenience foods redesigned to be healthier and less harmful to the environment. There also was stories coming out of them essentially saying they want you to start eating bugs. And then finally, the last one I wanted to hit on here was number 7. And again, this is just kind of get you guys up to speed on it. I encourage you to go do your own research and dive deeper into all this. But the values that built the West will have been tested to breaking point. We forget the checks and balances that bolster our democracies at our peril, writes Kenneth Roth, executive director of Human Rights Watch. Now, this one I agree with, that we've already lost our checks and balances here in the democracy, where essentially every leader, every political party in power across Western democracies appear to just think that they've got the sole right to govern and institute mandates, regardless of whether there's really any science or reason or logic behind it. And they're never discussing the actual trade-offs of sacrificing all of our freedoms in the hopes of just a tiny little portion of more safety. But anyways, that was just to kind of get you guys quickly up to date. Now let's listen about what these people think of themselves. So this is from Twitter, from James Lindsay. So the World Economic Forum's Great Narrative Conference. The good news is the elites across the world trust each other more and more. The bad news is the majority of people trusted the elites less. Yeah, I understand why, but let's hear her say it.
At Davos a few years ago, the Edelman survey showed us that the good news is the elite across the world trust each other more and more. So we can come together and design and do beautiful things together. The bad news is that in every single country they were polling, the majority of people trusted that elite less. So we can lead, but at Davos.
So I think the biggest question there is, if every single country, the plebs, the average person, doesn't trust you, should you really be referring yourselves as the elite, or be planning our futures if we trust you less and less these days? Just kind of food for thought. But let's hear this other clip. So in 2017, Klaus Schwab spoke at Harvard, bragging that he had Trudeau and half of his cabinet in on their plan to rid you of your possessions. You will own nothing and love it. We penetrate the global cabinets of countries with our WEF young global leaders. But again, let's literally hear it directly from them.
Say, when I mention our names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more, half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
And that's true in Argentina too. Wow.
So, again, the people that lovingly refer to themselves as our elites are focused on penetrating our government's cabinet. That sounds good. That sounds normal. That sounds like something you don't need to really worry about because, again, even though we don't trust those elites, let's just trust them. And so diving a little bit further on, what decided me to kind of present it today was this article from National Post. So again, so far, I haven't really been using anything but direct sources or mainstream media. So I haven't even got my tinfoil hat on yet, guys. But Chrystia Freeland's side gig with the WEF is endangering Canadian democracy. There's no need to invent conspiracy theories. The attempt by global elites to subvert local democracy is fully on and in plain view. And again, this article, I guess this wasn't from today. This is February 2nd, 2021. But it was making the rounds or got a repost. So the World Economic Forum, which has met at the Swiss ski resort of Davos every year since its creation in 1971 by German academic and entrepreneur Klaus Schwab, was forced to convert its annual Schmooze Fest into a virtual event this year due to COVID-19. Of note, on the main agenda was a stakeholder capitalism. We're going to get into stakeholder capitalism in a bit. But panel, which included Canada's Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. The former journalist turned politician has been a fixture at the WEF for years. Rubbing shoulders at Davos with the world's rich, famous, and powerful was one of the inspirations for her 2012 book, Plutocrats, The Rise of the New Global Super Rich and the Fall of Everyone Else. So again, if you guys didn't know, Klaus Schwab was the guy that wrote the Great Reset book, and our Deputy Prime Minister is the one that wrote of Plutocrats, The Rise of the New Global Super Rich and the Fall of Everyone Else. And she's an active member. She's a board member of that organization. These people, they literally hide in plain sight. I wouldn't even call it hiding at this point in time. It feels like they're peacocking or strutting. So this is a quote from her. After my book, Plutocrats, was published in 2012, I was even, and I know this will shock you, disinvited to a Davos dinner party. If the doors of Davos were closing for Freeland, they swung wide open after her entry into politics in 2013. She now sits on the board of trustees for WEF itself. And again, you guys can dive into this article. I just didn't want to read it all verbatim to you, but there's lots of great points in here. But let's just read kind of the wrap-up piece. So, like its first cousin, the Great Reset, which bizarrely aims to bring in environmental considerations under the purview of central banks, the innocuous-sounding stakeholder capitalism is committed to destroying the foundations of Anglo-American free market capitalism and replacing it with a system where governments and their cronies in Davos tell private businesses what they need to care about. The irony here is that all of those at Davos, including Freeland, got there because of the free market system and shareholder-driven capitalism, which they're now bent on overthrowing in the unholy alliance of true believers and opposition. So there's no need to invent conspiracy theories. The attempt by global elites to subvert local democracy is fully on and in plain view. Yes. And if you guys are curious, who actually went to 2020 World Economic Forum in Davos? Well, I've actually linked the video description down below, and I did it through 12FT, 12foot.io, which will allow you guys to get behind the paywall without having to pay. But they actually had someone leak to them the entire guest list of over 2,700 people, and we can actually see who's in it. So all you need to do here is type in Canada or type in a name if you want to see if they're actually part of the World Economic Forum, if they attended back in 2020. And so, we can see that the chairman of Pan American Silver is one of them. We can see the executive chairman of Acon Group. We can see the president and chief executive officer of CIBC Bank. We can see that the CEO of SNC Lavalin Group as well as there. Again, there's actually 54 different Canadians on this list. I'll leave you guys to do your own deep dive. But let's move on. This is from Zero Hedge, courtesy of the Strategic Culture Foundation. We're just going to get a little bit more into exactly what, old Klaus is up to and what stakeholder capitalism really is going to mean to us. So then there is a second man named Klaus Schwab, who is seen by the rest of the world and the thinking people within it for the monster that he is. A grimacing Klaus Schwab who appears on smartphone and tablet screens to warn of impending doom, no going back to normal, new pandemics which will strike very soon, and a wave of cyber attacks. This Klaus Schwab is a terrorist at large, a character who, like Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates, appears like a central casting dispatch of Bond villains. Obviously, this article and this author's got their own political bent and perspective, but I do think that they make some strong points that we're going to get into. So the idea of socially responsible capitalism isn't a new one. It represented the centrist wing of fascism some 90 years ago. It is, to wit, the embodiment of the last century's corporatist and technocratic ideal until about the 1970s with the introduction of Friedmanism. So in that sense, we can say that US and EU existed on two separate trajectories with more of the underpinnings of the EU based on the idea of social responsibility in the boardroom. But ultimately, the old idea of social capitalism has come back in a new incarnation, a new branding from the WEF, stakeholder capitalism and capitalism 2.0. A critical difference that cannot be understood or underscored enough, however, is that there is no long-term plan for the ISA, ideological state apparatus of stakeholder capitalism. They simply use the term capitalism to maintain social and ideological continuity from the present incarnation of monopoly capitalism. But the aim is to manage a strictly post-capitalist society. This is, however, not the one envisioned by the left, but rather one which develops new coercive and depopulating technologies along a misanthropic path towards the transition of the plutocracy and technocracy. So it's true believers who assume that people are good when they say good things and make good promises, and entirely ignore centuries of people's history of any insights into political and social theory. As Lord Acton, the British historian, said, all power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So again, I encourage you guys, jump in, read this entire article. There's a lot of interesting points made. It's a long one, so again, I just couldn't take the time to read it all to you. But moving on, I want to cover this from National News Watch as well. So initiatives to equalize everyone will only result in disorder. So last month, and this is from November 10th, 2021, last month in Ottawa, the Coalition for a Better Future, which consists of more than 100 businesses and industry associations, think tanks, and community organizers, held a summit to discuss how to make Canada more equal, environmentally friendly, and prosperous over the next few decades. The Coalition decided ideological orientation, evidenced by its summit and public statements, is of a suspicion towards free markets and supports collaboration between governments, corporations, and community organizers to impose their designs on us. So the scorecard has three broad categories: growing sustainability, living better, and winning globally. These are in turn broken down into 21 different metrics related to equality, innovation, climate change, international trade, and other things. The theme of increasing equality runs heavily through the Coalition's agenda. For example, one item on scorecard is income parity across genders, races, and people with disabilities. This goal is absurd. The only way to have uniform incomes across groups is through massive transfers of property and incomes, the effect of which would be to everywhere create moral hazards, encourage wealth dissipation, reward sloth, subsidize irresponsibility, and punish economically and socially productive behavior. The idea of grouping people by gender, race, or other characteristics to redistribute income is particularly worrisome. The general tendency is that when the government gives some people the right to take things from other people, the powerful do the taking. Yep, that's pretty much how it always works out. It doesn't matter whether you've got good intentions. It really depends on what the results are going to be. But one other point I want to make here, this is from the National Post. So Canada's rankings, and this was from today. So Canada's rankings in the Corruption Perceptions Index have plummeted under Trudeau. There was no single scandal that caused Canada's score to drop again this year. It's just the accumulation of events, a kind of hangover effect from lingering embarrassments. So again, great article. I encourage you to jump into and read all of it, but just want to highlight here. Canada's come off badly again in Transparency International's annual Corruption Perceptions Index, CPI, with the country's score falling faster than any other in the 180 country rankings. So, we're falling to the bottom as fast as possible under Trudeau. Thanks, buddy. Which were released this week. Canada's score has dropped to its lowest ever, 74 out of 100, a slide that has cost Canada 8 points over the past 5 years alone. So again, I'll leave it to you guys to dive into it. But as they said, there hasn't even been like a smoking gun issue that's came up. I think there's a few bubbling to the surface, but it's more just the general fact that we're becoming more and more corrupt as a society, that we're continuing to see political insiders being rewarded, single source contracts, and wait until we really start seeing the results and the aftermath of all the crazy policies and spending that's came through the COVID era. So again, I'll leave that for you guys to go down that rabbit hole. That's enough of the black pill. Let's move on to the clown pill for today. And so got a couple quick clown pills. And the first one here is, if you guys didn't see it circling on social media, Quebec has implemented a ban on unvaccinated from Costco and Walmart. So the province made it so that stores larger than 1,500 meters be banned for the unvaccinated. Those who wish to enter Walmart or Costco to use their pharmacies must be accompanied by an employee of the store. The province did not put a ban on the unvaccinated from entering grocery stores. However, the government said that Walmarts and Costco's were not primarily grocery stores and thus would be banned. And again, could this have been under black pill? Yes, this could have absolutely been black pill, but I figured I'd put it under clown pill because it's just so absurd at this point in time that you can go into the store, you just need to be walked or escorted or policed by an employee to make sure you don't, buy a bag of milk or a pillow or a sweater at Walmart or Costco. And literally, this is a photo from Walmart where they've got the people waiting for the, the dirty, unwashed plebs that are unvaccinated so they can be escorted to pharmacies only because, we wouldn't dare want them mixing with the vaccinated in Quebec. Could you think of the horrors that might bring on? So I just want to highlight this one piece from Rebel News. According to the CBC, the rule will apply to all supermarkets in the region to make sure they do not go and buy other products or other items that might be in the store. So I'm kind of curious, like if I go into the grocery store and I want to buy like a pair of tongs, are they going to literally be like, no, dude, milk only, bread only, you can't buy that, buy like a mousetrap? We should be insulted and they should be embarrassed about how little they respect you and how little they think of the average Canadian. And this is completely unacceptable. And I pray that there is a day of reckoning on the other side of all this silliness. And speaking of silliness, this is from CTV News. Quebec has issued $45 million in fines during the pandemic, but only a fraction of them have been paid. So just wanted to quickly highlight this, another clown story. From April 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2021, authorities have handed out a total of 30,488 tickets to citizens and businesses for not following measures in Quebec. Out of the $45,732,899 in tickets, Quebec's Ministry of Justice told CTV News that $5.7 million has been collected so far, as the vast majority of people who have been fined either ignored them or are challenging them in court. Respect to the majority of people that are, telling the Quebec government to go fuck themselves. And again, this is obviously just for your safety, right? That's why they need to collect this $45 million in fines. That's why they can't allow you to go grocery shopping or clothes shopping in a Walmart or Costco. God damn, what a clown world we live in, guys. And then one last clown story. This is from CBC News. So NDP's Jagmeet Singh denounces trucker Convoy, disagrees with brother-in-law's donation to the cause. So I saw this break yesterday. I was like, ooh, his brother-in-law's throwing some shade at him. Hardcore respect. But the story evolved. So Singh's brother-in-law donated $13,000 to group organizing trucker Convoy. $13,000. I don't know, I might be a decently well-off Canadian, but still $13,000 is not a drop in the bucket. I'd only write a $13,000 check to a charity or to an organization or GoFundMe that I truly believed in. But an NDP source speaking on background said his brother-in-law didn't fully comprehend what the money would be used for. There was a misunderstanding. Once he understood the true nature of this organization, a process was started to return the donation, the source said. My biggest question is, what did he think this was for? Did he think that this was a pro-vaccine mandate cause, and that's why he donated the $13,000? Because outside of the complete misunderstanding, like the complete 180 reversal here, I literally looks like just political posturing, right? The same way that Jagmeet essentially he had to admit that he got that $1,800 chair that was gifted to him, and then agreed to pay for it once he kind of got caught and had his hand slapped about. That doesn't really look too appropriate for the NDP leader to be accepting an $1,800 chair gift. So let's move on, though, to the white pill. Yesterday, I feel like we had a big white pill, which was talking everything trucker convoy. So today's white pill is a little bit shorter. It's a little bit more sparse. But I did want to highlight this from CBC. Researcher defends work after Saskatchewan Premier calls COVID-19 death study misinformation. Moriarty was featured in a recent Saskatoon Star Phoenix, this is the scientist, story in which she said the number of Saskatchewan deaths could be seven times higher than the provincial total of 977. Mo, the premier, was asked about the province's reporting at a news conference on Monday. And he said, "I'm hearing numbers that are in the thousands. That simply is nothing more than misinformation, and it should be challenged." And so he said the province averages 10,000 deaths a year, and a suggestion that COVID-19 deaths were being underreported, nothing short of some of the most egregious misinformation that I've seen throughout this pandemic, and it really shouldn't be spread. So again, as sad as this is, respect to a premier that's willing to speak the truth. And in case you think that maybe he's lying, according to Stats Canada, there was 10,219 deaths in 2020, which was 663 more than in 2019. So my biggest question is, if this researcher is even to be mildly believed that potentially almost 7,000 people died of COVID in Saskatchewan, does that magically mean that all of a sudden, like, all other sources of death disappeared during that period of time? Because that seems a little suspicious. And the 10-year average for deaths in Saskatchewan is 9,390. The province officially reported 153 COVID-19 deaths in 2020. So again, I don't know. It's fascinating to me to see. And yet the majority of this article, in my opinion, is really focused on propping up this researcher, the scientist, versus like being like, well, it does seem kind of strange that she's saying it could be as high as 7 times as much when, we barely saw a blip or a movement in the total number of deaths in the province. Again, this almost could have been a clown pill, but I was struggling to find white pill, so I thought I'd squeeze it in. One other one that I did want to share with you guys, this may or may not be a white pill for you, but if you know anything about me, I'm a big fanboy of Matt Ridley. Particularly, I love his book, The Rational Optimist. In fact, The Rational Optimist, that book, is probably one of the reasons I haven't gone completely batshit crazy and haven't decided just completely drop off the grid and just leave society to try and figure its own shit out. One of the reasons why I think the maple pill and trying to create common knowledge as game theory would dictate is so important that, hey, just so you guys know, you're not alone. You're not crazy. It's actually the mainstream. It's actually your politicians that are fucking crazy. And so Matt Ridley actually essentially put out, I'm not going to call it an apology, but essentially an admission that he was tricked. So this was, I think, originally posted in the Telegraph. I was duped by the COVID lab leak deniers. This came out on January 12th, 2022. That senior scientists saw evidence for theories that they trashed in public has shattered trust in science. Absolutely. And as his book, The Rational Optimist, states, high trust societies are how we got to this moment in time. If you can't trust anyone, you essentially collapse your sphere of influence. You collapse the individuals you interact with, which means we go back to generalists rather than specialists because, again, you can't trust any other motherfuckers. But so from his article for the Telegraph, inch by painful inch, the truth is being dragged out about how this pandemic started. It is just about understandable, if not forgivable, that Chinese scientists have obfuscated vital information about early access and their work with similar viruses in Wuhan's laboratories. They were subject to fierce edicts from a ruthless totalitarian regime. It is more shocking to discover in emails released this week that some Western scientists were also saying different things in public from what they thought in private. The emails were exchanged over the first weekend of February 2020 between senior virologists on both sides of the Atlantic following a meeting arranged by Sir Jeremy Farrar, head of the Wellcome Trust, with America's top 2 biologists, Francis Collins, director of the National Institute of Health, and Anthony Fauci, head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. So, again, really encourage you guys to read the entire article, but I just want to kind of read the wrap up here he had. At the time, given that I had written extensively on genomics, I was asked often about the chances that the pandemic started with a lab leak, and I said, this has been ruled out, pointing to the 3 articles in question. Only later, when I dug deeper, did I notice just how flimsy their arguments were. For example, the Nature Medicine paper included a passage saying the virus would have then required repeated passage in cell culture or animals with ACE2 receptors, but such work has also not previously been described. It is surprising to learn now that Sir Jeremy Farrar himself thought this very passage operation was a likely explanation of how the virus came to have its unique features. At the time, I trusted senior virologists who told me the lab leak would be dismissed. Frankly, I was duped. Yeah, more than just you, Matt Ridley. In fact, all of us were duped by our government because, again, they don't actually care about you. They simply care about maintaining power, maintaining their agendas. They don't give a shit about the average person or about individual freedoms or liberties. At this point in time, if you believe differently, you and I have a schism in the realities we live in. We literally live in 2 completely different universes, in my opinion. But sorry about the lack of white pills today. On the positive, again, if you guys are new to the channel, I literally am trying to start my own intentional community up here in Northern Ontario by Kenora. If you guys want to learn more, there's a link in the video description down below to the Problems and Profits Discord. I really encourage you guys to check it out. I think that what we're doing here is relatively unique in the world, but certainly unique in Canada. Recently, we just had kind of our first 2 transplants move up here to a nearby adjacent property. And again, I look forward to seeing more and more Canadians focused on freedom, on individual autonomy, continuing to relocate. And if you've got any questions, if you want to learn more, again, the best place is the Problems or Profits Discord. Link in the video description down below. But before we wrap up today, as always, I want to leave you guys with at least a little bit of humor. So let's switch gears. And while I haven't had a chance to really go into the Ukraine debacle that's going on right now, and let me know if you guys want to see an entire episode or series on Ukraine, because that's a pretty thick ball of wax for us to unwind, but it may be worthwhile. I just thought I'd share this meme. So if there's a conflict, we're screwed. Imagine these guys starting World War III. Yeah, I got to be honest, not a single one of those motherfuckers really instill any sort of pride or confidence from my perspective in dealing with like a Putin-esque type character. Again, I don't want to paint Russia as this evil empire and we're solely the good guys in this. It's a far more complex situation than I think a lot of the average people that consume mainstream media and average news sources realize. But anyways, I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me on another episode of The Maple Pill. If you're enjoying this, smash the like button. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe. If you guys hate having to watch me on YouTube or Facebook, a reminder, I am uploading replays of these Maple Pill episodes on Rumble. So again, you don't have to support big tech, although Rumble merging with Locos, they're probably going to eventually become big tech, but we'll leave that for another episode and another discretion. But let's pull up the chat real quick, because I really do appreciate those of you that are jumping in, sharing your thoughts, your opinions, what you're seeing going on. So we got Elizabeth saying first, hey, what's up? We got Benjamin. Okay, that was a bunch of names. Alan Grace, give me a thumbs up. Appreciate it. Oh, maybe you were tagging someone in that, in which case I appreciate that, Benjamin. Lexa saying, is that live? Yes, this is live. Hungarian Experiment, as always, appreciate the support. Mata, so I fear that someone will use this as false flag to deem unvaxxed as terrorists. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest concerns is Fed posters, you know, although I don't think they'll show up in jorts, you know, like jean shorts for the Ottawa protest because it's the dead of winter. I do have fears that either government actors or counter protesters will try and cause havoc in order to paint the main protesters, the main group that's part of the Freedom Convoy as terrorists or bad actors or white supremacists. It's fucking bullshit. You go watch yesterday's episode if you've been buying into that mainstream narrative. But again, I have the same fears as you, Mata. I do hope it will be 1 million people. Yeah, I hope that it's a crazy amount of people. I hope the entire city shuts down. I hope that the majority of politicians are actually forced to think about what their actions are causing, because there are so many unintended consequences from these mandates, from these lockdowns, from stealing freedoms from the average Canadian. And I personally, as we've mentioned in previous episodes, I think we're doing a giant disservice to an entire generation of Canadians. At a minimum, their growth is going to be stunted. But at a worst case scenario, not only is like their intellectual growth, but their social development is going to be completely stunted. Their ability to even like, read social cues without masks is going to be difficult for them to navigate, particularly for the very young who appear, if you look at the actual science and data, to be the least at risk of all this craziness. And yet we're willing to sacrifice an entire generation in the hopes that maybe we get one little sliver of more safety for those at risk in the older generations. This Basmatic, I think we're going in there with 150,000 and more still lined up on the highways. Yeah, I'd love to hear, what do you guys think? What sources are you turning to in order to try and figure out what's really going on with the trucker convoy? How many people are actually going to show up? Because it is hard to figure this shit out. Mike, what are your thoughts? It's Matt, but appreciate it, Jay Doe. Matt, what are your thoughts on investing in cash flowing Airbnbs? This is the wrong channel for that, but I appreciate you watching anyways. Abdul, damn, you totally called it. Bank of Canada didn't raise the rates. Yeah. And to be honest, like, I don't want to claim that I'm an expert analyst in any of this. I just feel like I'm not completely blinded by the mainstream narrative. I think anyone, again, with more than 2 brain cells to rub together could easily, if they spend a little bit of time looking at this and looking at the consequences of rapid interest rate increases, would likely come to a similar conclusion. But it is fun when you're right. So I do appreciate that. Hey, what's up, Adam, JD Martin? Laugh out loud. They're not raising those interest rates to that projection at all, Doves, 100%. I've literally been saying it for years now. Josh Kidd, governments have been inflation makers for the past 30 years. They are going to struggle to do the opposite. Absolutely agree with you. And that's one of the reasons I'm so bullish on Bitcoin. I know we've had a significant pullback over the last week or 2 weeks at this point in time, but I encourage those of you that haven't even looked at Bitcoin, that know nothing about Bitcoin, that maybe you've just believed what the International Monetary Fund or what, corporate analysts or politicians say about Bitcoin, start doing some research. And if you want to learn more about it, go to my website, mattmckeever.com, go to the e-guides or e-book section and download completely for free an e-guide I put together for Canadians so that you can better understand Bitcoin as well as figure out how to start stacking some sats. If you want to start actually buying or accumulating Bitcoin, there's a link in the video description down below to my Shakepay referral account. If you do it and you put $100 in your account, you get $30, I get $30. But again, if you don't want me to make any money off of it, I literally don't give a shit where or how you buy your Bitcoin. But I really think you're doing a disservice to yourself, to your family, to future generations in your family, if you're not at least educating yourself about Bitcoin. And just as a little tangent here, I was sharing on social media earlier this morning, I recently bought 10 more copies of the Bitcoin Standard. If you're looking for a good entryway book into understanding monetary policy, hard money, and Bitcoin, that's a great introduction. If you've read that and you want another one, I forget his last name, but there's an author, Jason, who's got Bitcoin, Hard Money You Can't Fuck With. That as well is a great book. So again, those 2 books. But if you want to start off with just free information, we've got the free e-guide on mattmckeever.com. Adam saying, also just straight up shout out to everyone watching this stream live or recorded. Thank you for caring, and thank you, Matt, for your continued effort to help Canadians stay informed. Appreciate that, Adam. And again, I really do feel a responsibility at this point in time to try and let Canadians know that you're not crazy, you're not alone, despite the fact that the mainstream media is trying to convince you otherwise. And I hope we continue to see the narrative crumble. I hope we get our freedoms back sooner than later. But if we don't, just know you're not alone. And I know it can feel very lonely. That's why we decided to put together the Maple Pill Show. It's why I'm trying to walk you through different stories, like take you through the blue pill, through the red pill, through the black pill, through the clown pill, to the white pill. Because at the end of the day, being black-pilled and staying black-pilled isn't good for anyone, right? You don't want to become a nihilist. You don't want to think that everything's fucked and the world's going to crumble and you've got no control over anything. Get white-pilled. Figure out what you can control. Whether that's moving up here to the Citadel with me or becoming my neighbor, whether that's just starting to grow a garden, whether that's just getting yourself into better shape than you were last year, right? Or losing the COVID 15 pounds that maybe you gained during lockdown or isolation, or just starting to meet your neighbors, start building local networks where, again, regardless of whether the supply chain bounces back or completely deteriorates, make sure you know people IRL that live around you. there's no real downside to that. Appreciate the support, Anna. And Hungarian Experiment saying praise be to Matt McKeever for creating this show, and shout out to everyone watching. Yeah, I really do appreciate that. Elizabeth saying stop shouting. Everyone is vaccinated on my unit and we're an outbreak, so effective. Yeah, it's so frustrating at this point in time. Like I want authenticity. I want truth. I want transparency. That's all I'm asking. It doesn't even have to be good news, but like at least explain why you're actually acting the way you're acting, Mr. Government, Mr. Administration, rather than just simply telling us it's for our own benefit without really providing any real perspective. So Jason says, go ahead, storm the Canadian Capitol again. Remember what happened to the last guy that did that? He ended up like Ashley Babbitt, didn't he? All right, Jason, sounds like you've got your own problems to work out in your life, but appreciate you watching nonetheless, even if you are hate watching. Great city of discontent. I'm in. Love it. Abdul saying, why would we need to own anything? Not like we need incentive to work or anything. Yeah, I mean, like, budgets balance themselves. Inflation doesn't matter. You don't need to own things, including your own body or bodily autonomy, because you're really just an asset of the state at this point in time. And at least, if nothing else, it's nice that the elites are starting to feel so confident that they're just pretty much saying it straight up that you're just, one more asset in their arsenal of possessions at this point in time. Again, appreciate everyone jumping in the comments. There's a lot to cover here. Graham Griffin, the unvaxxed shopper must be escorted. So based on their own logic, that puts the employee acting as the escort at increased risk. How absurd can it get? Yeah. I shared a meme earlier today, or a little meme I made, which was a Bender from Futurama saying, kill all humans. And literally at this point in time, I feel like that's going to be the next step in the government's COVID-19 policy is we need to stop COVID from infecting people. We need to stop it from killing people. So let's preemptively kill everyone so that COVID can't kill anyone. It feels like we're maybe just one or two steps away from that sort of logic. But again, maybe I'm just a little too black-pilled today. Tony saying, thank you for crushing comforting lives with the red pill, brother. Appreciate it, Tony. Appreciate everyone that's in the comments every single weekday when we do these shows. And again, reminder, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every single weekday. Did you see the one video in Quebec with the kids? It looked like it was straight out of 1940s Germany. Yeah, there's some really chilling comparison photos. I'll leave you guys to go do your own due diligence or research on them. But certainly, while I don't want to jump the shark in comparisons, we need to understand that it wasn't a light switch in Germany where things went from good to bad. It was a gradual decline. And we're all human. We're all capable of making mistakes. We're all capable of buying into false narratives, or we're all capable of being agitated and fearful. And when people are acting from a place of emotion, they often, in my opinion, make very bad decisions. I want people to make logical, rational decisions rather than emotional decisions. So again, there are some very chilling photos out there, JJ. Great stuff, Matt. It was hard for me to choose between the Maple Pill and the Mike Rosehart show on Wednesday, though. Well, I'm glad that at least you jumped in to give us a little bit of support, Logan. Thanks for speaking out, Matt. So many people need to wake up and realize what is going on. I miss when we could actually say Canada is the true north, strong and free. Yeah, 100% agree. Again, I don't want to put the past on some sort of pedestal, but it certainly feels like we were a lot freer a couple of years ago than we are today. Hell, it feels like we were a lot freer June of 2020 than we are today. And yet now we've got vaccines. We should understand this virus a lot more than we did back in June 2020. And yet here we are. Senorita, Matt, I love your thoughts on real estate investing right now with this current insanity and what's ahead and how we're planning to take away personal property through the Great Reset. Yeah, I that's one of the reasons that I'm pushing Bitcoin. I'm not saying you need to go all in on Bitcoin, but I think that if you're an individual with even some means, allocating 1 to 10% of your portfolio, depending upon your own risk profile and your long-term plans, is a very reasonable strategy into Bitcoin while you continue to educate yourself. But I think that looking for assets and asset classes that the government cannot easily seize is a smart long-term play. I'm not necessarily saying that 10 years from now, there's literally going to be dudes with guns that are going to take your real estate, but there's a lot of different ways that we can have the erosion of private property, right? We can see giant taxes on it. We can see equity taxes. We can see, freezes on rent prices or certain mandates or restrictions on how your business model runs. So I think that it's very important that real estate investors that want to be real estate investors for decades and be able to pass down their real estate to future generations, you need to get involved in politics, particularly at the local level, and support people at the provincial and federal level as well. Because if you don't speak out, who else is going to, right? It's kind of scary realizing that we're the adults in the room, but we are, and that gives us a certain responsibility to speak out and speak up. So Braden says, Trudeau went on tonight claiming he is fighting for our freedom, democracy, and that it's just a small amount of Canadians joining the convoy. Literally the most divisive leader in Canadian history. It certainly feels that way. And it's just shocking how quickly it all happened. And honestly, I can forgive the first 2 weeks. I can maybe even forgive the first 2 months of all this craziness. But at this stage, to be doubling down on the rhetoric, to be doubling down on the fear mongering, to be doubling down on the divisiveness, it's very difficult for me to be able to forgive that. And I can promise you, I'm never going to forget it. I encourage you guys to never forget it. But again, really appreciate those of you that are supporting this show, that are sharing this on social media, because understand the algorithm, the powers that be in technology, they don't want to see this being spread out, right? As far as they're concerned, this is all false information, even though you can literally go see every one of my sources in the video description down below and do your own due diligence and make your own decisions. I'm not saying you have to agree with me, but I'd love for you to be making more informed decisions. And that's the end goal here. So appreciate you guys. We'll see you tomorrow night, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's it for the Maple Pill. And maybe tomorrow I'll find some better white pill stories. And as always, you can share your story recommendations with me in the Problems or Profits Discord. And again, link in the video description down below.